A year from now, I would stand on a brightly lit stage, looking out at a sea of faces. I'd be wearing a sharp, crimson pantsuit, my voice steady and clear as it carried through the auditorium. A year ago, I would say, my words echoing slightly, I thought my life was over. It turns out, it was just beginning. But that was a year from now. Tonight, my life felt very much like it was ending, one shattered piece at a time. It began, as most endings do, with a phone call. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled our Seattle home. A warm, comforting cloud that clung to the curtains and settled over the polished oak dining table. I was just placing the rack of lamb, its crust a perfect golden brown, onto a serving platter. It was Ethan's favorite. I had spent the afternoon preparing it, along with roasted asparagus and a creamy potato gratin. A perfect meal to welcome him home after what he'd called a brutal week at the law firm. That's when my phone buzzed on the granite countertop. I glanced at the screen. Ethan. A small smile touched my lips. He was probably calling to say he was stuck in traffic. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Hey, you. Dinner's almost ready. Elara, we need to talk. His voice wasn't rushed or apologetic. It was calm, measured, as if he were discussing the weather. A chill snaked down my spine, ignoring the warmth from the oven. The family trip to Maui is next week, he continued, without preamble. Wednesday. It's for a full week. I've already booked the flights and the resort. My hand, holding the platter, froze midair. The silence stretched, filled only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Awake. 7 days. I carefully set the lamb down, my movements slow and deliberate. My own voice, when it came, sounded strangely distant, like it belonged to someone else. Okay, what time is the flight? I'll need to put in my time off request tomorrow morning. A short, almost imperceptible sigh came through the phone. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of his patience wearing thin. That's the thing. Elara, the villa I booked only has 3 bedrooms. It would be too crowded with everyone. It's just not going to work out. I stared at the pristine white wall in front of me. 3 bedrooms. I did the math in my head, my mind working like a cold machine. His father and mother. 1 room. His brother, Liam, and his girlfriend. A 2nd room. His aunt and cousin. The 3rd room. 6 people. So, you shouldn't come, he finished, his tone matter of fact. I squeezed the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. There it was. The 3rd time. The 3rd year in a row. The calm before the storm wasn't in the sky. It was inside me. A terrifying, hollow stillness. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The beautiful rack of lamb, the perfectly browned potatoes, the crisp asparagus of it suddenly seemed like a cruel joke, a feast for a ghost. All of my effort, all of my hope for a connecting evening, was destined for the trash can. I knew you'd understand. Elara, Ethan said, and I could hear the genuine relief in his voice. It was the most infuriating sound in the world. You're always so reasonable. Oh, and while I'm gone, don't forget to water the succulents on my office windowsill, and the gardenias outside. They need it twice a week. Okay, I managed to say. The word felt like swallowing glass. Great. I'll see you later tonight. I've got to go. We're wrapping things up here. He hung up. I stood motionless in the kitchen. The phone screen went dark, like a light being switched off inside my eyes. 3 years of marriage. Not a single invitation to the annual family vacation. The 1st year, the excuse was that I'd just had a miscarriage. A long trip would be too much for me, he'd said with feigned concern. The 2nd year, my job was too demanding. It would be hard for me to get the time off, he'd reasoned. This year, he hadn't even bothered with a convincing lie. The villa is too small. Mechanically, I began to clear the table that had never been set for 2. I scraped the untouched food into the garbage disposal, the grinding sound echoing the churning in my stomach. My wrist trembled as I picked up a plate. and it slipped from my grasp, shattering on the tile floor with a sickening crash. I stared down at the scattered fragments of porcelain, shimmering under the kitchen lights. They looked just like I felt, like this marriage, shiny and beautiful on the surface, but broken into a million pieces at the slightest touch. My phone chimed again. A notification from the Garcia Family Fun group chat. A message from my mother-in-law. Brenda, Maui, here we come. Can't wait for our annual trip. Everyone remember to pack sunscreen. They're predicting a heat wave. A flood of celebratory emojis from everyone else followed. Liam, his girlfriend, his aunt, everyone. The whole family. Tears blurred my vision. For them, I wasn't family. I was just a stranger who lived in their son's house. A glorified, unpaid housekeeper. I walked into the living room and pulled out the photo album from the bookshelf. I flipped to a picture from last year's trip, the one they took in Barcelona. In it, Ethan's arm was slung casually around his brother's shoulders. His mother, wearing a loud floral dress, sat beaming in the center. His father stood stiffly to the side. All of them were smiling, the deep blue Mediterranean sea sparkling behind them. That day, I had been home alone, burning up with a 102-degree fever. I had called Ethan, my voice hoarse and weak. Just take some Tylenol and get some sleep, he'd said, his voice distant and crackling. You'll be fine. We're about to go scuba diving. The signal is terrible here. Talk later. He'd hung up before I could say another word. I sank to the kitchen floor, the cold tile seeping through my jeans. I began to pick up the broken pieces of the plate. One by one, a sharp edge sliced my finger. Blood welled up, a bright red dot against my pale skin. But the small cut was nothing compared to the gaping wound in my soul. My phone rang again. A video call. It was Chloe, my best friend. I quickly wiped my tears, schooling my expression into something resembling neutral, and answered. Elara, you will not believe the lunatic client who came into the firm today. He tried to argue that his pet parrot was a dependent for tax purposes. Chloe's cheerful rant stopped abruptly. She squinted, leaning her face closer to her screen. What's wrong with you? Your eyes are all red. It's nothing. I lied, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. I was just chopping onions. Don't you dare lie to me. Elara Vance, I've known you for 15 years. I know you're chopping onions face. And this isn't it. Chloe's brow furrowed. What did that idiot Ethan do this time? Under her sharp, unwavering gaze, the fragile armor I had built around myself crumbled. In halting sentences, my voice dropping to a whisper, I told her everything. I feel like a joke. Chloe, a complete and utter joke. A joke. Elara, the only ones who are a joke are Ethan and his ridiculous family. She said, her voice laced with fury. Wake up. These people do not see you as one of them. They never have. I remained silent. Deep down, I already knew that. I just hadn't wanted to admit it to myself. 3 years ago, at our stunning wedding overlooking the Puget Sound, Ethan had kneeled and promised me a lifetime of happiness. The memory was still so vivid. How had we gotten here in the blink of an eye? Elara, Chloe's voice turned serious. Do you remember that prenup you signed? I nodded. It was a month before the wedding. Ethan had brought it up out of the blue, claiming it was a family tradition to protect assets. Even though it had felt cold and clinical, I'd signed it. I wanted to prove to him and his family that I wasn't after their money. The house is in your name. Right. She pressed. The down payment was a wedding gift from your parents. It was. I confirmed. We registered it as my separate property. It was only in my name. I frowned. A new, unsettling thought taking root. But a few months after we got married, Ethan insisted I add his name to the deed. He said it was about appearances, that it looked bad for the man of the house not to be on the title. So I did. Chloe's expression darkened. When? Exactly. Did you do that? About 6 months in. He brought it up every day. He said all his colleagues' wives had done it, that he was embarrassed at the firm. My voice was laced with a bitter self-mockery. I had been so desperate for his family's approval, so eager to be the perfect, supportive wife. Chloe's fingers were flying across her keyboard. I could hear the faint clicking sound through the phone. Okay, that complicates things. But since it was your separate property to begin with and you made the down payment, that portion and its appreciation should still be yours. Who paid for the renovations? Mostly me, I admitted, shame washing over me. I used the money I'd saved for years, about $80,000. His family contributed maybe $15,000. Do you have proof? Receipts? Contracts? Yes, I nodded. I kept the contract with the builders and all the receipts. I'm meticulous about that stuff. Good, Chloe said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. She paused, her eyes meeting mine through the screen. Alara, I need you to be very careful, and I need you to listen to me. His family is going away next week. This is an opportunity. We need to find out exactly what's going on. The word we hung in the air between us. It was a lifeline. I wasn't alone in this. What do you mean? I asked, my heart starting to pound. I mean, she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone. It's time to find out what your husband is hiding in that locked office of his. After Chloe's call, I didn't move from the floor for a long time. The house, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and cold around me. Our wedding vows, framed in elegant calligraphy on the mantelpiece, seemed to mock me, to have and to hold. In sickness and in health, I had held up my end of the bargain. I had nursed him through the flu, supported him through his bar exam, and managed our home so he could focus on his career. What had he held? Secrets, lies. The sun rose the next morning, casting long shadows across the living room floor. The other side of our king-sized bed was empty and cold. Ethan hadn't come home. It was the 7th time this month. I got out of bed and walked to the closet. My fingers brushed past the soft fabrics of sundresses and silk blouses. Clothes Ethan said made me look like the perfect corporate lawyer's wife. Today, I ignored them. My hand settled on a charcoal gray pantsuit I hadn't worn in years. It was the suit I'd worn to my last interview, before deciding to scale back my interior design business to support Ethan's burgeoning career. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My 29-year-old face was etched with a weariness that went far beyond lack of sleep. Fine lines were starting to gather beneath my eyes, and my skin, once vibrant, looked dull. It was the face of a woman who had spent 3 years holding her breath. I carefully applied concealer, hiding the evidence of last night's tears, and added a swipe of bold, red lipstick. It was a war paint. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe's signature sharp bob and even sharper gaze. She held to coffees and a paper bag that smelled heavenly of fresh pastries. I figured you wouldn't have eaten, she said, thrusting the food into my hands the moment I opened the door. Americano, splash of oat milk, no sugar, and your favorite almond croissant. The rich aroma of the coffee was a small comfort. In this city, besides the barista at our usual spot, Chloe was the only one who remembered how I took my coffee. Ethan didn't even know I was allergic to peanuts. At a family gathering last year, he'd insisted I try a salad loaded with them, saying how delicious it was. So, Chloe said, pulling her laptop from her bag and getting straight to the point, you said you needed legal advice. Lay it on me. I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. I took a deep breath and began, choosing my words carefully. If I wanted a divorce, how would I protect myself? Chloe's eyes lit up with a fierce, protective fire. Finally, she breathed. She immediately pulled up several files on her screen. First, assets. You said the house was initially in your name? Yes, a wedding gift from my parents. I registered it as my separate property. But then, I added his name. For appearances, I said, a bitter smile touching my lips. I was a fool. Stop that, Chloe said sternly. You were in love. He manipulated you. Now, what about his finances? Do you know exactly how much he makes? The question left me blank. Ethan's income. Since we'd gotten married, we'd kept our finances largely separate. He'd told me a ballpark figure, but I'd never pressed for details. It felt improper. He told me around $100,000 a year. He transfers $2,000 a month into our joint account for household expenses. The rest, we manage ourselves. My voice grew smaller. I pay the mortgage. Chloe's eyebrows shot up. What? You've been married 3 years. You pay the mortgage on a house you basically bought, and he only contributes $2,000 a month for bills? He said he was investing his money. I whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to my own ears, and that his parents were getting older, and he needed a cushion for their potential medical expenses. Alara. Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting through my haze of self-blame. That is not a normal marriage. You are being scammed. The truth of her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tears pricked my eyes again. To everyone else, I was Mrs. Garcia, living in a beautiful modern home in a wealthy suburb, driving a luxury SUV. The reality was I had to budget carefully just to buy a new winter coat, while Ethan thought nothing of buying his mother a $2,000 handbag for her birthday. We have to find out what his real financial situation is, Chloe said, her tone all business. Do you have access to his computer? His files? His office is always locked, I said, feeling a surge of defeat. He says it's full of confidential client information. Then, a memory surfaced. But I have an emergency key. He gave it to me when we first moved in case of a fire. I keep it in the kitchen junk drawer. Be careful, Alara. He can't know you were in there. Chloe warned. Look for bank statements, investment records, anything with numbers on it. She paused, her expression softening slightly. And look for any evidence of an affair. My heart clenched. The affair. The possibility I had desperately tried to ignore was finally being brought into the light. After Chloe left, I stood in front of Ethan's office door, the small silver key cold in my palm. We had promised to respect each other's privacy. I had never once entered his personal space without permission. Today, I had to break that promise. The sound of the key turning in the lock was unnaturally loud in the silent house. As the door swung open, the faint scent of his Cologne sandalwood and bergamot hit me. The office was immaculate. Law books on the shelves were arranged by height. Not a speck of dust marred the surface of his large mahogany desk. I started with the drawers. The top one held routine work documents. The middle one contained several photo albums. I flipped through them. They were filled with pictures of Ethan and his family. Ski trips to Whistler. Holidays in the Hamptons. There were only a handful of photos of the two of us together. Tucked away at the very back, the bottom drawer was locked. That small act of concealment was more damning than anything. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a small, discreet safe hidden behind a row of encyclopedias on the bottom shelf. Ethan had bought it last year to store important documents. My hands trembled as I knelt before it. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. His birthday. Incorrect. On a gut-wrenching impulse, I typed in his mother's birthday. With a soft click, the safe opened. Inside was a neat stack of files. On top was a copy of the deed to our house. My house. I unfolded it. My blood ran cold. It was the deed, but under the section for ownership, it clearly stated Ethan Garcia and Alara Vance as joint tenants with right of survivorship. 50-50. I distinctly remembered the original document stating I held a 70% share as my separate property contribution. He had forged it. He had changed it without telling me. I dug deeper, my hands shaking. I found several bank statements. The balance in Ethan's primary account made me gasp. It wasn't the modest savings of a man making $100,000 a year. It was over $1.5 million. And there were regular monthly transfers, ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, to someone named Sophia Dubois. At the bottom of the safe was a plush, dark blue velvet jewelry box. I opened it. Nestled inside was a diamond necklace I had never seen before. A receipt from Tiffany & Co. was tucked underneath. The price was over $20,000. The date of purchase was my birthday last year. My gift from him had been a bouquet of roses. Beneath the box was one last thing, a photograph. In it, Ethan was holding a young, beautiful woman in his arms by a resort pool. They were wearing matching swimwear, their smiles brilliant and intimate. On the back, written in a loopy, feminine hand, was a single line with my love. Sophia, Maui, August 2023. The exact week he had told me he was at a legal conference in Chicago. The world tilted on its axis. All the late nights at the office, the vague excuses, the unexplained expenses had all clicked into place. My phone vibrated in my pocket, the sound making me jump. It was a text from Ethan. Hey, going to be a late one tonight. Dinner with a big client. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, then glanced at his WhatsApp profile picture. It was a photo of him at a fancy restaurant. I zoomed in. In the reflection of his wine glass, I could just make out the shape of a woman with long, dark hair sitting across from him. Her hand, with nails painted a bright, garish red, resting on the table. In that moment, a strange, cold clarity washed over me. All my self-doubt, all my guilt, it all vanished. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overly sensitive. I was a fool who was being played. Calmly, I took out my phone and photographed every single document. The forged deed, the bank statements, the receipt, the picture of him and Sophia. I sent them all to a secure email address Chloe had set up for me. Then, I put everything back exactly as I had found it, closed the safe, and left the office, locking the door behind me. At 10 o'clock, Ethan came home, smelling of alcohol and a perfume that wasn't mine. I was sitting on the living room sofa, watching him with empty eyes as he stumbled out of his shoes. Hey, babe, still up? He slurred, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head away. You smell like perfume, I said, my voice flat. I don't like it. Ethan froze for a second, then chuckled, a little too loudly. Must have been from the client meeting. You know how some of those women douse themselves in it? Right, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Is this client's name Sophia? The color drained from Ethan's face. His drunken haze seemed to evaporate instantly. What are you talking about? Nothing, I said, standing up. It just popped into my head. You must be exhausted, working so hard to please your clients. Ethan's face shifted from pale to red. Elara, listen to me. I can explain. There's nothing to explain. I cut him off. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving him standing alone in the living room, his expression a mixture of panic and confusion. As I closed the bedroom door, I leaned against it, my legs finally giving way. I heard his frantic footsteps outside, then his hushed, urgent voice on the phone. He was undoubtedly warning Sophia. My phone lit up with a message from Chloe. Evidence received. Holy hell. Elara, we've got him. He's done. Come to my office tomorrow. And this time, you do exactly as I say. I replied with a simple okay and deleted the chat history. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind eerily calm. The old Elara would have been sobbing her heart out. The new Elara, she just wanted to laugh. This whole marriage was a farce, and the curtain was finally coming down. Ethan crept into the bedroom just before dawn, moving with a feigned stealth that was meant to avoid waking me. I felt the dip in the mattress as he lay down, the air suddenly thick with the stale scent of whiskey and another woman's perfume. He lay perfectly still, his breathing shallow. He was pretending to be asleep, waiting for me to make the first move. I didn't. I matched my breathing to his, feigning a deep sleep I was far from feeling. After a few tense minutes, he broke the silence. His voice was a low murmur in the dark. Elara, are you awake? I waited a beat before stirring, as if pulled from a dream. What is it? About last night, he began, his voice laced with a carefully constructed apology. I was out of line. The pressure at work has been immense. I'm sorry if I was short with you. He was testing the waters, trying to see if a simple apology would smooth everything over. As it had so many times before, the old Alara would have accepted it, eager to restore the peace. The new Alara simply stared into the darkness. "Which resort are you staying at in Maui?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. His body tense beside me. "Oh, just a standard place. The firm has a corporate deal with them." "Really?" I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Not the Grand Wailea again?" "I hear the villas with the private plunge pools are incredible this time of year." He sat bolt upright in bed. The pretense of sleepiness vanished. "Have you been spying on me?" "Spying?" I turned to look at him, the faint morning light filtering through the blinds striping his face, revealing the panic and rage warring in his eyes. "Do I need to? You forgot to block me on Instagram." "Ethan, last August, legal conference in Chicago. You said." The geotag on Sophia's post said Grand Wailea, Maui, and that Tiffany necklace she was wearing in the photo? It was beautiful. His face contorted. "You went through my things. You have no right. And you have a right to cheat on me?" I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed and switching on the bedside lamp. The sudden light made him flinch. 3 years. Ethan. 3 years of separate finances while I paid the mortgage on this house. 3 years of me catering to your family while you were secretly funding another woman's life. You don't get to talk to me about rights. His face turned pale. Then, in a flash, he grabbed a pillow and hurled it against the wall. "Enough. Do you think I wanted this? I'm tired of coming home to your long face every single day. Sophia is 100 times more fun than you are. She actually knows how to make a man happy." I watched his pathetic outburst in silence. It was almost comical. This was the man I had sacrificed my career for. This coward, who, after being caught in a web of his own lies, still had the audacity to blame me. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Let's get a divorce. You can go be happy with Sophia, and I can have a quiet life." "Divorce?" He let out a harsh laugh, as if I'd told the funniest joke in the world. "In your dreams, half of this house is legally mine. What are you going to live on if you divorce me? That little hobby of a design business you have won't even cover the property taxes." So that was it. His trump card. He had it all figured out. He was so certain I was trapped that I would never dare to leave him. Seeing that smug, confident look on his face, I started to laugh. A real, genuine laugh that seemed to bubble up from a place of pure, unadulterated freedom. "We'll see about that," I said, the laughter dying down into a confident smile. He wasn't expecting that. He was left speechless, his mouth hanging slightly open. I lay back down, switched off the lamp, and turned my back to him. I could feel his confused, angry gaze burning into my back in the darkness. "Alara," he finally said, his voice a low growl, "don't you dare do anything stupid. My brother Liam is getting married. He needs a house. I've had my eye on this place for him for a while." There it was, the final piece of the puzzle. I closed my eyes, my nails digging into my palms. It was never just about the affair. It was a long-planned family conspiracy. They would live off me, in my house, and then, when the time was right, they would take it from me and give it to his brother. Ethan began to snore beside me, a loud, obnoxious sound. I didn't sleep a wink. As the first true light of dawn broke, I rose silently from the bed. I packed a small overnight bag with essentials, gathered all my important documents, and slipped out of the house. The cool morning air felt crisp and clean in my lungs. I took a deep breath and called Chloe. "Chloe, I've made up my mind," I said, my voice firm. "I'm taking back everything that's mine." On the other end of the line, Chloe's voice was filled with grim satisfaction. "That's my girl. I'm waiting for you at the office. The war has begun." I hung up and hailed a cab. In the rearview mirror, the house I had poured my heart and soul into for 3 years grew smaller and smaller. This time, There would be no second thoughts, no turning back. Chloe's law firm occupied the top floor of a glass skyscraper downtown, with panoramic views of Elliott Bay. I sat in her sleek, modern office, a cup of coffee clutched in my hands. In front of me, Chloe had printed out all the evidence I'd sent her. "It's worse than I thought," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Based on these bank statements, Ethan has transferred over $300,000 to this Sophia woman in the last 2 years alone. Legally, that's called dissipation of marital assets. We can claw most of that back." I nodded silently, my fingers tracing the cold, hard numbers on the paper. $300,000, the equivalent of my salary for years, and he had given it away to his mistress without a second thought. "But the most serious thing is this," Chloe said, pulling up another document on her large monitor. "I ran a preliminary credit check on him this morning. 3 months ago, he applied for an $800,000 home equity line of credit." "What?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "He never said a word to me. He wasn't planning on telling you," Chloe said, her face grim. "The stated purpose of the loan was home renovation. But there are no renovations planned for your house, are there?" "No," I whispered, sinking back into my chair. My voice trembled. "Do you think?" "I think that bastard was planning on buying his mistress a house with the equity from your house," Chloe finished, her voice cold with fury. "But that's not the most urgent problem. Look at this." She opened a file containing a scanned copy of the loan application. "To get a loan on a jointly owned property, he needs your signature." I stared at the screen. There, in the signature box next to his, was my name, Alara Vance. It was a near-perfect forgery of my signature. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He hadn't just lied and cheated. He had committed fraud. He was actively trying to steal my home, my inheritance from my parents, right out from under me. "Legally," Chloe said, her voice turning sharp and precise, "if he gets that loan approved before we can act, it creates a massive legal mess for you. We would be in a very weak position. So what do I do?" I asked, my hands clenched into fists. "Do I just sit here and let him destroy me?" "Absolutely not." A predatory glint appeared in Chloe's eyes. "We get ahead of him. The down payment was from your parents. The renovations were paid for by you. You have proof of everything. We file for divorce immediately, citing his adultery and fraud as grounds. We file for an emergency court order to freeze all his assets. And we file a police report for the forgery." "A police report?" The idea of involving the police, of making this public, terrified me. "Yes," Chloe said firmly. "This isn't just a messy divorce anymore. Alara, what he's done is a crime. Forgery. Fraud. He could be facing prison time." Prison. The word hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. We mapped out a plan. First, I needed to secure my own finances and move somewhere safe. Second, we had to officially report the deed as fraudulent and get the title corrected. Third, we would file everything with the court before he even got back from his romantic getaway in Maui. As I left Chloe's office, she pressed a set of keys into my hand. "It's a small condo I keep for investments. It's empty right now. Stay there. Don't go back to the house." A cornered animal like Ethan could do anything. I hugged her, overwhelmed with gratitude. Outside the building, the afternoon sun felt warm on my skin. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Alara, where the hell are you?" Ethan's voice was a furious snarl. "My mother just called. You never sent her the gift basket for her trip. She needs it for tomorrow." I almost laughed. His world was collapsing. His crimes were about to be exposed, and his primary concern was a gift basket for his mother. "I've been busy," I said calmly. "I had some things to take care of." "Well, unbusy yourself and get it done," he barked. He paused, his tone shifting slightly, becoming suspicious. "Hey, what we talked about this morning, you're not really going to do anything crazy, are you?" "Crazy?" I asked, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" "Ethan." There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to gauge my intentions. "Nothing. Never mind. Just get that basket for my mom. And I'll see you when I get back from Maui. We'll sort this out." "Okay, Ethan," I said softly, and hung up the phone. I immediately went to my bank, closed our joint account, and transferred my personal savings into a new account at a different bank that he knew nothing about. Then, I went to the county recorder's office. With my original purchase agreement and my driver's license, I filed a formal fraud complaint regarding the deed. I requested an immediate title investigation and placed a lis pendens on the property legal notice that it was under dispute, making it impossible for anyone to get a loan against it or sell it. As I walked out into the late afternoon light, I felt a sense of profound relief. The house was safe, at least for now. No matter how many banks Ethan went to with that forged deed, he wouldn't get a dime. The war had begun, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was the one holding the weapons. The next few days passed in a blur of focused activity. I stayed in Chloe's condo, which quickly became my sanctuary and war room. The first thing I did was call my parents. I told them everything, leaving out no detail, my voice cracking as I confessed how long I'd let the charade go on. Contrary to my fears, there was no "I told you so." My father's voice was a low, steady rumble of anger, but it was all directed at Ethan. "That boy will regret the day he ever met our family," he said, the words a solemn promise. My mother simply cried, not for my foolishness, but for my pain. "Oh, my sweet girl," she sobbed. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? You don't have to go through this alone." They drove down from Portland the next day. Seeing them at the door of the condo, their faces etched with worry, broke the dam of my composure. I fell into my mother's arms and wept, releasing 3 years of pent-up loneliness and fear. They didn't offer platitudes. They made me tea, stocked the fridge with my favorite foods, and sat with me in comfortable silence. Their presence was a silent, unshakable wall of support around me, with their strength bolstering mine. I was back in Chloe's office the next morning, ready for the next phase. She had a stack of documents waiting for me, each one a legal weapon aimed at the heart of Ethan's deception. "This is the petition for dissolution of marriage," she said, tapping the first pile. "We are filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences, but we're attaching a declaration detailing the adultery and financial fraud. This is the motion for an emergency freeze on all known assets. And this," she pushed a final document toward me, "is a request for a temporary restraining order. You think I need that?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "He's a cornered narcissist who is about to lose everything." Chloe stated flatly, "Yes, you need it. It means he can't contact you, can't come near the condo or your parents, and he can't harass you at work. Once you sign these, I'll have them filed with the court by noon." I picked up the pen, its weight feeling monumental in my hand. My signature, which Ethan had so easily forged to steal from me, now felt like an act of liberation. I signed each document with a clear, steady hand. "Okay," Chloe said, gathering the papers. "Now for the fun part. We have to serve him." She grinned, a shark smile. "He and his family are staying at the Grand Wailea in Maui. I've already hired a local process server. He's a former Marine who specializes in serving evasive individuals. Ethan should be receiving a very special delivery poolside, probably right in the middle of his afternoon Mai Tai." A day later, the explosion came. It was just after 2 p.m. Seattle time, which meant it was 11 a.m. in Maui. I was with my mother, sorting through old photos, when my phone rang with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again, and again. On the 4th call, I answered, putting it on speaker as Chloe had instructed. "You bitch." Ethan's roar was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ethan," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the surface of a frozen lake. Chloe's coaching had been invaluable. Do not engage. Do not get emotional. Be a gray rock. My cards were just declined. All of them. The hotel manager just came to our cabana and said there's a hold on my accounts. What the hell did you do? Alara, I believe you were served with some legal documents. I said evenly. They should explain everything. I suggest you find a lawyer. A lawyer? I am a lawyer. He screamed. I could hear his mother's panicked voice in the background. You think you can do this to me? To my family? I will ruin you. You will walk away from this with nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. I'm recording this call. Ethan, I said. The lie coming easily. Any threats you make will be submitted to the court. There was a sudden, choked silence on the other end. The lawyer in him finally surfaced through the rage. When he spoke again, his voice was a low, menacing hiss. You will regret this for the rest of your life. He hung up. My hands were shaking, but a fierce, triumphant energy coursed through me. The first shot had been fired, and it had hit its mark. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother-in-law. Brenda, Alara, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing. She began, her voice dripping with venom. But you have ruined this family's vacation. Ethan is beside himself. How could you be so selfish and cruel? Brenda, I said, cutting her off. Did you know your son was having an affair? Did you know he was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on his mistress while I paid the mortgage? She sputtered. That is a private matter between a husband and a wife. You don't air your dirty laundry and humiliate your husband in public. He made a mistake. A good wife would have forgiven him. A good wife doesn't get left behind from every family vacation, while her husband takes his girlfriend instead. I retorted, my patience snapping. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Do not contact me again. I blocked her number, then Liam's, then his father's. I systematically erased the entire Garcia family from my life. The next move came faster than I expected. The following afternoon, I received a call from a polite but flustered woman who identified herself as a real estate agent with a high-end brokerage. Ms. Vance, I'm calling about the listing for your home. She said, we have a cash buyer who is very interested, but I just received a notification about a lis pendens filed on the property. My client, Mr. Garcia, didn't mention any legal disputes. My blood ran cold, even from Maui. With his assets frozen, he was still trying to outmaneuver me. He had tried to sell the house from under me. Ma'am, I said, my voice dangerously calm. My husband does not have the authority to sell that property. The deed he showed you is fraudulent, and the matter is currently under a criminal investigation for forgery. If your brokerage proceeds with any transaction related to that address, you will be named in the subsequent lawsuit. Do I make myself clear? There was a stunned silence, followed by a hasty apology. Yes, of course. Ms. Vance, I am so sorry. We will be terminating the listing agreement immediately. I hung up and immediately called Chloe. She let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. He is more desperate and stupid than I imagined. Good thing you filed that notice. You cut him off at the knees. Ethan and his family cut their trip short. Flight trackers showed they were due to land in Seattle late that night. My father, a man of few words but decisive action, looked at me. We're going to the house. What for? I asked. We are changing the locks, he said, his expression grim. And we are installing a security system. That is your property, and he is no longer welcome there. That evening, I stood on the porch of the home I had once loved, watching a locksmith work his magic. My father stood beside me, a silent sentinel. My mother was inside, beginning the long process of packing up Ethan's belongings into boxes. Each click of the locksmith's tools felt like a step toward freedom. When he was finished, he handed me a new set of keys. They felt solid and real in my hand. They were keys to my house, not ours. Mine. As the locksmith's van drove away, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and Ethan got out. His face was a thundercloud of rage. Behind him, His parents and Liam emerged, their expressions a mixture of anger and indignation. They had come straight from the airport. He stormed up the walkway, his old key already in his hand. My father stepped forward, blocking his path. "You're not welcome here, Ethan," my father said, his voice low and steady. Ethan ignored him and shoved the key into the lock. It didn't turn. He tried again, jiggling it violently. A look of pure, uncomprehending fury crossed his face as he realized what had happened. He turned his blazing eyes on me. "You changed the locks? On my own house? It's not your house anymore, Ethan," I said, holding up my new key. "The court will decide what's yours. Until then, you're trespassing." The battle had come home, and I was ready for it. Brenda, Ethan's mother, pushed past my father, her face contorted in a mask of outrage. "How dare you? My son pays for this house. This is his home. You can't just kick him out." My mother appeared at the doorway behind me, a box labeled Ethan's office junk in her hands. She set it down with a deliberate thud. "Act early, Brenda," she said, her voice dripping with an icy calm I had rarely heard. "My daughter pays the mortgage. My husband and I paid the down payment. Perhaps you should ask your son where his money has been going for the past 3 years. I believe the name is Sophia." Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Ethan's father, a man who usually lurked in the background, stepped forward, his expression stern. "Elara, this is unbecoming. Families work through their problems. You are making a public spectacle." "A spectacle?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think I'm the one making a spectacle? Your son forged my signature on a loan application for nearly $1 million. He was planning to mortgage this house, my house, to buy a condo for his mistress and probably help Liam here with a down payment. Does that sound like a problem you can just work through?" Liam, who had been hanging back, flushed a deep red. His eyes darted nervously toward Ethan. The accusation had hit its mark. They were all in on it, in one way or another. "That's a lie," Ethan finally roared, finding his voice. He took a step toward me, his fists clenched, but my father moved to intercept him, placing a solid hand on his chest. "You will not threaten my daughter," my dad said, his voice a low growl. "You've done enough damage. Now get off her property." "Or what?" Ethan sneered, trying to regain his footing. "You'll hit me. Go ahead. A restraining order goes both ways. An assault charge would look great on you." From my pocket, I pulled out my phone and held it up. The screen was lit, the red recording button clearly visible. "Every word you say is being recorded. Ethan, for someone who claims to be a top lawyer, you're being remarkably reckless." The fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked from the phone to my father's unyielding face, to my mother's cold stare, and finally to me. The rage in his eyes was replaced by a dawning, horrified realization. He had completely lost control of the narrative. He was no longer the charming, successful husband managing his overly emotional wife. He was the villain, and we had the receipts. "We've packed your things," I said, my voice steady. "They're in boxes just inside the door. You can take what you need for a few nights. The rest will be sent to your parents' address. You have 10 minutes. He stared at me, his mouth working silently. He had expected tears, pleading, a hysterical scene he could manipulate. He had not expected this. This calm, organized, and utterly impenetrable front. Without another word, he and Liam walked inside, returning a few minutes later with 2 suitcases and a few of the boxes. They worked in a tense, furious silence, loading the car as Brenda and his father watched, their faces grim. As Ethan was about to get into the car, he turned and looked at me one last time. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said, his voice low and filled with venom. "This is just the beginning. I will drag this out for years. I'll bury you in legal fees until you have nothing left. You'll be begging me to settle. Good luck with that, Ethan," I said, giving him a small, dismissive smile. "My legal fees are being paid for by my parents. What are you going to use? All your accounts are frozen. His face turned ashen. He had forgotten. In his narcissistic rage, he had forgotten that he was, for all intents and purposes, broke. He slammed the car door shut, and the town car sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in the quiet suburban street. I leaned against the doorframe, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. My mother put her arm around me. "It's over for tonight," she said softly. "You were so strong." The next few weeks were a relentless battle of legal attrition. Just as he'd promised, Ethan's lawyer, a slick corporate shark from his own firm, filed motion after motion to delay the proceedings. They contested the asset freeze. They disputed the restraining order. They demanded endless documentation from my business, my parents, even my gym membership. It was a clear strategy to harass and intimidate me into submission. But they underestimated me, and they severely underestimated Chloe. For every motion they filed, Chloe filed a counter-motion, sharper and more precise. For every demand they made, she responded with a demand of her own, requesting full disclosure of Ethan's hidden accounts, his communication with Sophia, and the financial records of his entire family, looking for evidence of collusion. "He's trying to bleed you dry," Chloe said during one of our late-night strategy sessions over takeout pizza at her office. "It's a classic bully tactic, but he doesn't realize we're not playing his game. We're playing chess, and he's playing checkers." While the legal battle raged, I focused on rebuilding my life. I poured my energy back into my interior design business. I took on new clients, worked on new projects, and reconnected with a passion I had let wither for far too long. The work was healing. Creating beauty and order out of chaos felt like a metaphor for my own life. One afternoon, I received an email that made my heart stop. It was from the Seattle Police Department's Fraud Division. "Ms. Vance, this is to inform you that following our investigation into your complaint, we have found sufficient evidence to press criminal charges against Ethan Garcia for forgery and attempted grand larceny. A warrant for his arrest will be issued within 48 hours. I stared at the words, reading them over and over. Criminal charges, an arrest warrant. This was real. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This had escalated to a level I had never truly comprehended. I immediately forwarded the email to Chloe. Her response was instantaneous, a long string of celebratory emojis followed by a text. Checkmate. That evening, I was at the house, packing the last of Ethan's books into a box, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Sophia. She stood on my porch, looking smaller and younger than she did in the photos. She was dressed in expensive, trendy clothes, but her face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door, leaving the security chain on. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Can I just talk to you for a minute? Please." I didn't know who else to go to. I stared at her, this woman who had been a ghost haunting my marriage for years. There was no triumph in seeing her like this, only a weary sadness for the whole sordid mess. I unlatched the chain and opened the door. "You have 5 minutes," I said, crossing my arms. She stepped inside, looking around the house with a mixture of awe and envy. "He told me this was his house," she said softly. "He said you were just living here until the divorce was final. He told you a lot of things, didn't he?" I said, my voice hard. Tears welled in her eyes. "He said he was going to leave you. He promised me. He said he was buying us a condo, that we would start a life together. He gave me so much money, I thought it was his." Her voice broke. "The police came to my apartment this morning. They asked me about the money. They said it was marital property. They said I might be charged as an accomplice. So that was it. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to save herself. And you want me to help you?" I asked, incredulous. "I'll give it all back," she said desperately, pulling a thick envelope from her designer handbag. This is the cash I have left. I'll testify against him. I'll tell them everything he said, everything he planned. Just please, tell them I didn't know. I was just stupid. I believed him. I looked at the envelope, then back at her tear-streaked face. She was a victim, too, in a way, a pawn in Ethan's sick game. But I was done cleaning up his messes. That's between you and the district attorney, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. My only advice to you is to get a very good lawyer. Now, your 5 minutes are up. I opened the door and gestured for her to leave. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but she saw the unshakable resolve in my face. She turned and walked away, leaving the envelope of cash on my entryway table. I didn't touch it. I left it there for the police to collect. It was evidence now. 2 days later, Ethan Garcia, Esquire, was arrested at his prestigious law firm. In full view of his partners and colleagues, he was let out in handcuffs, his carefully constructed world shattering around him, one clink of the cuffs at a time. The war wasn't over, but the decisive battle had been won. The news of Ethan's arrest spread like wildfire. A junior associate at his firm, who had always been secretly friendly with me, sent me a text message an hour after it happened. The whole office is in shock. They walked him out of a partners' meeting. I've never seen anything like it. The firm, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, immediately placed him on indefinite leave and scrubbed his profile from their website. The professional humiliation was swift and brutal. For a man whose entire identity was built on the foundation of his prestigious career, it was a fate worse than prison. His arrest changed the entire dynamic of the divorce proceedings. His legal team, once aggressive and condescending, became suddenly cooperative. The flurry of harassing motions ceased. Their strategy shifted from offense to damage control. Chloe received a call from Ethan's lead counsel. The tone was no longer arrogant, but conciliatory. He said they're ready to discuss a settlement. Chloe told me over the phone, a triumphant smirk in her voice. Suddenly, they're very motivated to avoid a public trial. What are they offering? I asked, packing the last box of my own things from the house. I had decided to sell it. Too many ghosts lingered in the minimalist rooms and sun-drenched hallways. I needed a completely fresh start. It's a lowball offer. Of course, Chloe said. They're proposing you keep the house, and they'll waive any claim to its equity. In exchange, you drop the civil claims for the dissipated assets, and you persuade the DA to drop the criminal charges. I laughed. A real, hearty laugh. He still thinks he can bargain his way out of this? He thinks I'm that naive? He's a narcissist. He will always believe he can outsmart everyone in the room. Chloe replied, So, I assume my response should be a polite but firm hell no? Tell them we will see them in court. I said without hesitation, both civil and criminal. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was for every time he had made me feel small, every lie he had told, every time his family had looked through me as if I were invisible. He wasn't going to get away with it. Not this time. While the legal machinations churned on, I found an unexpected sense of peace. My parents had returned to Portland, confident that I was safe and in good hands. I moved into a bright, airy apartment downtown, overlooking the water. It was smaller than the house, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every color on the walls, was my choice. There were no ghosts here. My business flourished, free from the oppressive weight of my marriage. My creativity soared. I took on ambitious projects, and my work started getting noticed. A local design magazine featured one of my projects, a sleek, modern loft renovation. In a 4-page spread, the article called my style bold, confident, and unapologetically modern. Reading those words, I felt like they were describing not just my work, but the woman I was becoming. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ethan's father, Richard. Alara, he said, his voice heavy with a weariness I'd never heard from him before. I am not calling to argue. I am calling to ask for your mercy. I remained silent. waiting. Brenda has not been well since Ethan's arrest. He continued. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. She has been hospitalized twice. The stress of this, it's destroying her. Ethan is her only son, her pride and joy. He is a grown man who made his own choices. Richard, I said, my voice cool. I know that. He sighed. I know he has made terrible mistakes. We did not raise him to be this way. But he is still our son. If he goes to prison, it will kill his mother. I am begging you. Is there nothing we can do? We will pay back the money. We will give you whatever you want. Juster, please. Have mercy. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something akin to pity. He sounded like a broken man. But then I remembered. I remembered Brenda's sneering voice on the phone, calling me selfish. I remembered Richard standing on my porch, telling me my fight for justice was unbecoming. Their concern wasn't for the damage done to me. It was for the damage done to their family's reputation and comfort. Their mercy was just another form of manipulation. The time for mercy was when your son was forging my signature. Richard, I said, my voice hardening. The time for mercy was when he was lying to my face every single day for years. What happens now is not in my hands. It's in the hands of the justice system he thought he was above. Goodbye. I hung up before he could respond. The door to that chapter of my life was closed, and I had just bolted it shut. The criminal trial was scheduled first. It was a short, straightforward affair. The prosecution presented the forged deed, the fraudulent loan application, and the expert testimony of a handwriting analyst who confirmed the signature was not mine. Sophia, having been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, took the stand. In a quiet, nervous voice, she detailed Ethan's promises, his lies, and his elaborate plans to use the house's equity to fund their new life together. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, looking gaunt and pale in an ill-fitting suit. He didn't look at me, but I could feel the weight of his presence in the courtroom. He had aged a decade in a few short months. The charming, confident mask had been stripped away, revealing the weak, entitled man underneath. He didn't take the stand. His lawyer's defense was weak, arguing that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that Ethan had always intended to tell me about the loan. The jury didn't buy it. They were out for less than 2 hours. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. On the charge of forgery, we the jury find the defendant, Ethan Garcia, guilty. A gasp went through the gallery, where his parents sat. Brenda began to sob loudly. On the charge of attempted grand larceny, we the jury find the defendant, Ethan Garcia, guilty. Ethan slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. It was over. He was a convicted felon. His law license would be revoked. His life as he knew it was utterly and completely destroyed. I walked out of the courtroom and didn't look back. I didn't feel triumph, or joy, or even satisfaction. I just felt quiet, a quiet sense of finality, a quiet sense of release. The sentencing was 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, looked down at Ethan from the bench. Mr. Garcia, she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. You were an officer of the court. You took an oath to uphold the law, yet you used your knowledge and position not to serve justice, but to perpetrate a calculated and malicious fraud against your own wife. Your actions were a profound betrayal of trust, both personal and professional. She sentenced him to 3 years in state prison. Brenda let out a heart-wrenching wail and collapsed in her husband's arms. Ethan, pale and trembling, was led away by the bailiffs. The civil trial, which took place a month later, was a mere formality, with his criminal conviction as evidence. The judge ruled decisively in my favor on every single point. The marriage was dissolved. The house and all its equity were declared my sole and separate property. Ethan was ordered to repay the full $300,000 he had given to Sophia from marital funds, his remaining personal asset stocks, savings, his retirement account were liquidated to satisfy the judgment. I was even awarded punitive damages and all my legal fees. When it was all said and done, Ethan Garcia was left with nothing but a prison sentence and a mountain of debt. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Seattle sunshine. Chloe was waiting for me on the steps, a huge grin on her face. She threw her arms around me. "We did it," she whispered in my ear. "You're free." I hugged her back, tears finally stinging my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of relief. The war was over. I had survived, and I had won. That afternoon, I met with the real estate agent. We stood in the empty living room of the house, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I have a wonderful young family who is very interested," the agent said, her voice bright with optimism. "They fell in love with the place. They said it has such a happy feeling." I smiled. "Good," I said, signing the last of the sales documents. "It deserves to be happy." As I left the house for the very last time, I paused on the porch and looked back. It was just a building of wood and glass and stone. My life wasn't in there. My future wasn't in there. My future was out here, waiting for me. I got in my car, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away, not even bothering to look in the rearview mirror. 1 year later, I stood backstage, the muted roar of the crowd a distant hum through the heavy curtain. I adjusted the lapels of my crimson pantsuit and took a slow, deep breath, the scent of lavender from the diffuser in the green room calming my nerves. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Chloe. "Break a leg out there. They're going to love you. P.S. Don't forget to mention your brilliant lawyer." I smiled. A year ago, the idea of standing in front of 1,000 people to give a keynote speech at the Pacific Northwest Women in Leadership Conference would have been terrifying. Now, it just felt right. And now, a voice boomed from the other side of the curtain. "It is my great honor to introduce a woman whose story of resilience and reinvention has inspired so many. A leader in the design world and a powerful advocate for personal empowerment. Please welcome Alara Vance." The applause was a wave of sound that washed over me as I stepped into the bright, warm lights. I walked to the center of the stage, my heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. I smiled at the sea of face, mostly women, of all ages and backgrounds, their expressions open and expectant. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and steady. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost my marriage, my home, and my sense of self. I felt like a failure, a fool who had been tricked and discarded." I paused, letting the raw honesty of the words settle in the large auditorium. I stood in the rubble of the life I had so carefully built and thought, "This is it. This is the end." But I was wrong. I looked out, making eye contact with a young woman in the front row. It turns out, it wasn't an ending. It was an excavation. I had to dig through the debris of betrayal and lies to find the one thing I had forgotten. I still owned myself. Over the next 30 minutes, I told them my story, not the sordid, tabloid details of the affair or the legal intricacies of the court cases. I told them the story of my own transformation. I spoke of the insidious nature of emotional manipulation, the slow erosion of self-worth that happens when you value someone else's approval over your own. I talked about the terror and exhilaration of fighting back, of finding my voice after years of silence. The most important contract you will ever sign is the one you make with yourself. One concluded, my voice ringing with a conviction born from experience. It's a promise to honor your own worth, to protect your own peace, and to never, ever give anyone else the power to define you. Your life is your story. Make sure you are the one holding the pen. The standing ovation was deafening. As I walked off stage, my heart swelled with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It was more than just pride. It was a profound sense of purpose. My pain had been forged into something useful, something that could perhaps light the way for someone else lost in the dark. In the years since the divorce, my life had blossomed in ways I could never have imagined. My design firm, Vance Interiors, had taken off. The magazine feature had led to a flood of new clients, and I'd had to hire a small team to keep up. I'd bought a beautiful condo in a historic building downtown. with old brick walls and a view of the Space Needle. It was my sanctuary, a space that was entirely my own. A few months after the trial, I'd received an email from a professor at the University of Washington's law school. She had read about my case and asked if I would be willing to speak to her family law class about the practical realities of financial fraud in divorce. That one talk had led to another, and then another. I discovered I had a knack for public speaking, for taking complex, painful subjects and making them accessible and empowering. As I was leaving the conference, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair stopped me. "Ms. Vance," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to thank you. I'm leaving my husband. After 20 years, I've been so scared. But listening to you today, you gave me courage." She squeezed my hand, and in that simple gesture, I felt the true measure of my victory. It wasn't in the court rulings or the financial settlements. It was here, in this connection, in knowing my story mattered. That evening, I met Chloe for celebratory cocktails at a chic rooftop bar. "Well, look at you, Ms. Keynote Speaker," she said, raising her glass. "You've officially become a guru." "Hardly," I laughed, taking a sip of my spicy margarita. "I'm just a woman with a story. It's a hell of a story," she said, her expression turning more serious. "Speaking of which, I have some news. From the Where Are They Now files." My smile faltered slightly. "Ethan." Chloe nodded. "He was granted early parole for good behavior. He got out last week." A cold knot formed in my stomach. 3 years was the sentence. He had only served 18 months. "Oh, he's back living with his parents," she continued, watching my face carefully. "His father had a mild stroke a few months ago, and Brenda is a wreck. The family is basically broke after paying restitution and legal fees, and Liam's fiancée left him. Apparently, her family didn't want to be associated with, well, you know, the Garcia empire, built on arrogance and appearances, had crumbled to dust. I should have felt a sense of vindication, a final, satisfying twist of the knife. Instead, I just felt a profound sense of detachment. Their lives, their dramas, their karma had nothing to do with me anymore. It was like hearing news about strangers. "Does this change anything for you?" Chloe asked gently. "Knowing he's out." I thought about it for a moment, swirling the ice in my glass. I thought of the fear he used to inspire in me, the power his moods had held over my entire existence, and I realized, with a sudden, liberating clarity, that it was all gone. "No," I said, and I was surprised by how true it felt. "It doesn't change a thing. He has no power over me anymore." We finished our drinks, talking about work, friends, and Chloe's latest disastrous date. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line was "Publishing Offer, the Vance Method." It was from a major publishing house in New York. An editor had seen a video of my speech from the conference and wanted to know if I was interested in writing a book, not a memoir, but a practical guide for women on how to achieve financial and emotional independence. I showed the email to Chloe, my eyes wide. "Is this real?" She scanned it, her lawyerly eyes absorbing the details. "It's more than real, Alara. It's a 6-figure advance." She looked at me, her grin spreading from ear to ear. "I told you you were a guru." That night, as I sat in my quiet, peaceful apartment, I thought about the offer. A book, a chance to take everything I had learned, every painful lesson, and shape it into a tool that could help thousands of women. It felt like the perfect culmination of my journey. I opened my laptop and started to type. I wrote the introduction in a single, fluid rush, the words pouring out of me. I wrote about the myth of the fairy tale marriage and the danger of losing yourself in someone else's story. Just as I was finishing the last sentence, an unknown number appeared on my phone. My heart gave a small, reflexive jolt, a muscle memory of old fear, but I didn't ignore it. I answered, my voice calm and neutral. "Hello." There was a moment of silence, then a man's voice, hesitant and rough. A voice I almost didn't recognize. "Elara, it's Ethan." I held the phone to my ear, the silence stretching between Seattle and whatever broken-down place he was calling from. His voice was different. The smooth, confident cadence of the lawyer was gone, replaced by a gravelly, hesitant tone. He sounded like a stranger. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked. My voice was not angry, not fearful, just tired. I was a person who had moved on. Being called back to a conversation I had no interest in having. I saw the video of your speech," he said, his words stumbling over each other. "A friend sent it to me. You were incredible. You look happy." "I am," I said simply. There was nothing else to add. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background of his call. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry, Elara, for everything. I know it's too late. I know the words are meaningless now, but I had to say them. What I did to you, it was monstrous. There's no excuse." I listened, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. This was the apology I had once craved, the validation I had once believed I needed to heal. Hearing it now, it felt like an echo from a distant past. It didn't stir any emotion in me, positive or negative. It was just information. "When you're in prison," he continued, his voice thick, "you have a lot of time to think. All the noise, all the ego, it all gets stripped away. You're left with just yourself." And I didn't like the man I saw. The man who could betray the only person who ever truly cared about him. The man who valued money and appearances over decency and love. He took a ragged breath. "I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my family's respect, and I deserved it. I deserved all of it. I just wanted you to know that I know that. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I have no right to it. I had to tell you." I thought about all the things I could say. I could rage at him, list his crimes one by one. I could hang up without a word. I could offer a cold, polite acceptance of his apology. Instead, I found myself saying something I hadn't expected. "I hope you find a way to build a better life, Ethan," I said, and I realized, to my own surprise, that I meant it. His failure or success no longer had any bearing on my own happiness. His fate was his own, and I genuinely hoped, for the sake of his own soul, that it would be a fate of redemption rather than continued misery. Wishing him ill would only keep a tether of bitterness connected between us, and I was done with tethers. "Thank you, Elara," he whispered, and he sounded like he was crying. "That's more than I deserve." He hung up. I put my phone down on the desk next to my laptop. The cursor blinked on the last sentence I had written for my book proposal. "The greatest act of love is the one you show yourself." Ethan's call wasn't a disruption. It was a confirmation. I had truly, finally, moved on. He was a ghost from a past life, and his apology was simply the sound of a distant door closing for good. 6 months later, I was in New York, sitting in the sleek, glass-walled office of my new editor. We were finalizing the cover for my book, which was now titled Unbreakable, A Woman's Guide to Forging Strength from the Ashes. My face, in a professionally shot photograph, smiled back at me from the mock-up. The woman on the cover looked confident, serene, and in control. I was finally starting to feel like her every day. The book's release was a whirlwind. It debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list for advice and how-to. The media tour was exhausting, but exhilarating. I did morning shows, podcasts, and radio interviews. In every interview, I told my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had turned her scars into a roadmap for others. The letters and emails poured in. Women from all over the world shared their own stories with mysteries of leaving abusive partners, of starting their own businesses, of finding the courage to demand what they were worth. I had started a conversation, created a community. My personal tragedy had been transformed into a public good. One afternoon, while I was back in Seattle between tour dates, I was having coffee at an outdoor cafe when I saw a familiar figure walking down the street. It was Ethan's mother, Brenda. She looked older, frailer. She was carrying a bag of groceries that seemed too heavy for her. She didn't see me. As she passed my table, her paper grocery bag, overloaded and damp on the bottom, ripped. An avalanche of canned goods, apples, and a carton of milk tumbled onto the sidewalk. The milk carton burst, splashing white across the concrete. She stood there, looking at the mess, her shoulders slumped in defeat. A few people glanced over but kept walking. Without thinking, I got up from my table. I knelt and began to help her pick up the cans. She looked down at me, her eyes widening in recognition, her face flushed with shame. "Alara," she whispered. "Let me help you," I said, my voice gentle. I gathered the rolling apples and placed them in my own tote bag. I handed her a napkin to wipe the milk from her shoes. We worked in silence for a moment. How have you been?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I've been very well, Brenda," I said honestly. She looked at me, truly looked at me. For the first time, she saw the confident set of my shoulders, the peace in my eyes. She wasn't looking at her former daughter-in-law, the quiet girl she had always dismissed. She was looking at a woman she didn't know at all. "I read your book," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the pavement. "My sister gave it to me. You are a very strong woman. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything." It was the closest she would ever come to an apology, and it was enough. "Everyone makes mistakes," I said. I helped her to her feet and handed her my bag with her salvaged groceries. "Take care of yourself, Brenda." I walked back to my table, leaving her standing on the sidewalk. I didn't look back. There was no anger left, no bitterness. There was only a quiet, settled peace. I had faced all my ghosts, and I had found that they held no power over me. A few weeks later, my book tour ended. I came home to my quiet apartment, my sanctuary. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the city, the light glinting off the Space Needle. Chloe came over with a bottle of champagne to celebrate. To the best-selling author, she toasted, her eyes sparkling. "So, what's next for the unstoppable Alara Vance? World domination? A run for president?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Something much smaller and much bigger. I'm starting a foundation." I explained my idea, a non-profit that would provide grants and legal resources for women trying to leave financially abusive relationships. I would use a portion of the book's profits to fund it, to turn my success into a tangible lifeline for others. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "Alara, that's perfect. Of course, you are. You've come full circle." She was right. I had come full circle. I had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged not just intact, but stronger, brighter, and forged anew. My story hadn't been an ending. It had been a violent, painful, and ultimately beautiful beginning. We stood on my balcony, sipping champagne and watching the city lights twinkle to life. It was a clear, cool night, the kind where you can see every star. I looked up at the vast, endless sky and felt a profound sense of gratitude. I had lost a marriage, but I had found myself, and it was the best trade I had ever made. My life was my own. The story was mine to write, and I was just getting started.